Welcome to Uncharted. I'm your host, Captain Kelly Gordon, and with me today is Captain Scott Kidd. So awesome to have another captain on here, and I have known of Scott for years and years and years and years, all the way back to when I was a baby captain. Admired him. He was to the equivalent of my hero, and I was always too timid to reach out to him and speak to him. And funny enough, as time goes by and my social media presence grows, I saw one day that Scott Kidd liked one of my posts, and I just was over the moon about it. And here we are now, friends that have never met. We've been literally in the same shipyard and still didn't have the time to get over to one another. But I'm so excited to have you here, Scott. Just so many things I want to talk about, so many things we have in common, boats, obviously being a captain, obviously, but also having a side hustle. And I think really in any career these days, it's important to have a side hustle. But you talk about it in terms of just how sometimes I guess fickle could be the word that the yachting industry is. I mean, you could potentially come to work dressed in the wrong outfit one day, and if the owner doesn't like it, you're out of there. So having a side hustle, I think, is great. And then also, too, if you're coming off of charter boats and you're walking away with a $4,000 or $5,000 tip, what are you doing with these types of monies? And so you're also known as the yachty real estate investor. So then when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, not only is he like my hero, my idol, and we have all these things in common. He's a captain, he's into investing and having a side hustle and to real estate. And you're far more along in real estate than I am. I just dabble a little bit, but what made me want to bring you onto the podcast is because just at last Flib's boat show, I had a young lady chase me down on the docks, and she was like, Captain Kelly, I have a really weird question. And I'm like, shoot, go ahead. What is it? And she says, what do I do with my money? And I said, that's a really good question. She says, because I have done what you have said in one of your reels, don't go blow it on an expensive handbag. She did. And she says, I had such buyer's remorse. So normally, while we talk about mental health and our path to getting here, I wanted to kind of change it up today and talk about, for any of the young yachties that are listening, or older yachties or not yachties, how you've gotten to where you are as a captain, first of all, and how you got into real estate investing. So maybe start from the top as to, I don't even know where you're from, Scott, and how you got started.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm really flattered that you think that of me, and I really appreciate all this kind words. It means a lot, and especially coming from you. That you are such a unique person, and that you're very compassionate and empathetic towards a lot of people, and you help a lot of people. And that's kind of what one of my main mantras is, always kind of how I can add value to people. And that means a lot to me, because just us meeting here now, that means that we can go on and help a lot more people and grow together and do a lot of amazing things. But to answer your question, how I started, I'm originally from Jamaica. My dad's Jamaican, my mom's American. And kind of just fell into yachting. I needed a job. I lost my tech job and my tech business, and I was back in Jamaica, and a friend asked me I wanted to work on a boat at Fort Lauderdale Boat Show in the year 2000. And I said, well, I don't know anything about working on boats. Is that okay? And he said, no, that's fine. You just got to get here. So I borrowed the money for the ticket. My friend Merrick gave me some cash. I landed with about $20 in Fort Lauderdale. And I was intended on going back to Jamaica, but I never looked back, because I loved it so much. It was, I didn't even know that was actually a career or something like that. But, flash forward, yachting gave me a lot of opportunities. Met my wife, and with kids. And as the family grew, we bought a bigger house, and we rented it, and like a lot of people do. And then, I intended on buying another one and another one every so often, and just kind of build up my portfolio from there. And then there'd be another, nest egg of retirement, stuff like that. But a friend of mine was, we were on the beach and we were talking. He said he had bought and sold an apartment complex, the 46 unit in Houston, Texas, and he had made, he'd made probably in the lower seven figures with him and his brother. And I asked him, I said, well, you can do that? And he said, yeah, you can do that. I did it. Anybody can do it. And I didn't know. He said it's not that much more difficult than buying your house and stuff like that. So, I said, well, that's where that started the light bulb moment for me because, as we know, on the yachts, it can be a very unstable business. It can be zero to zero all in the same day, sometimes even in the same hour.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. We've lived through it, and always had some kind of thing. And I wanted to have some type of business that would generate income without, which I thought would be kind of passive. Which come to find out, a lot of ways you invest in real estate not actually very passive, especially single family homes. You have to get a manager, you have to manage the people, and none of it really is unless you get into like funds or, syndications where you're invested, you mainly just as a limited partner putting in the money. And which is the way I kind of started with the apartments because I wanted to learn more about it. But it's been a great experience because yachts and real estate, especially when you're scaling, the same thing that we do all the time is building a team.
Yep.
And I love doing that. And that's it's just amazing that I'm meeting all these people and we can grow together.
And you
And
have
I
a
want to
group.
say, yeah,
Like
it's
that is like so cool. Like I want to go back to something though, because it's you said that hit a chord with me is you said you didn't have the money to get to Fort Lauderdale, so you borrowed the money for a plane ticket. And that that shows something. That shows determination, that shows grit, that shows, I don't have the money now and I don't really know where I'm going. I don't know if I'm going to get a job, but I'm going to dive in and I'm going to trust the process and I know myself and I know that I will find a way. And that really got me and that's really, we hear a lot of times from people outside of the industry that want to get into the industry. And of course, yes, we want to offer them the best advice how to get in, but there's a part of me that's just like, you just have to jump. You just have to
yeah,
jump. You just have
well,
to go, you know?
yeah, it's something that I well, looking back, would I do that today? Probably not, but I was young, and I kind of lived my life that way. I ended up a lot of places without any money or doing anything, but I always just kind of figured it out. I think a lot of it is my parents and just the way they always kind of went for stuff. My parents had businesses and stuff when I was a kid, and my dad was a big entrepreneur. Still is. He never really worked other than for a Price Waterhouse in Jamaica for somebody else.
Okay.
So my mom always, she always was always like a can do kind of attitude. They both were very hard workers, and I knew that you get back to the U.S. There's just so much opportunity here, and there's people say best country in the world, but that's all relative to your likes, dislikes, your culture, and stuff like that. But as far as like a financial opportunity, bar none. There's nothing out there like it. I've been, and yourself too, have been a lot of different countries. It's everything's slow to go, and you have to talk to only certain people, have these abilities, or even taught that they have these, opportunities. But in the U.S., you can start and fail multiple businesses. So I knew once I got back here, all I got to do is put my head down, work, I'll figure it out. Because I've been, I bought and sold businesses and stuff and failed. Some of them had failed, some of them did good, some of them didn't do so
You got
bad.
to fail a lot.
Yeah,
You got to
that's
fail a lot.
that's the only way you learn. I mean, that's the advice that I'd give to my younger self and to younger people is just go for it and sail faster and fail as much as possible because you got to get it out of your system and just kind of go for it because you're going to make mistakes. And if you sit there and you keep overanalyzing, waiting for the right time, it's never the right time, but it's always the right time. To
Yes.
start something new is always right. Right now is the time. Don't wait till you have this, and this, because you'll probably never do it.
No, that's exactly it. And I remember um, when I first wanted to get into real estate myself, and for me, I had been dating a farmer in the town that I grew up in North Central Indiana. And typically, when a farmer acquires another farm, there's usually a farmhouse on it. They don't want the farmhouse comes with it. They want the ground. So what they end up doing is they just rent it out because they just happen to have it. And so I was watching and noticing how they had all of these rentals, and I was like, well, this is a fantastic idea.
Mhm.
And so I was probably, no, how old would I have been? I would have been 19, 20, 21. And when I was looking at all of this and thinking about all of this, and so then time went on, and I kept thinking, it kept nagging at me. I was like, this has just got to be such a good way to make money. And I had watched my mom buy and sell the house, her first house in town, and then move to the farm, buy and sell that one, move to the second farm. And I'm like, man, these farmers do this. My mom has just done it with our personal homes. I'm like, this just makes sense. Well, so I studied. The first book that I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad. So
Oh, nice.
highly recommend it. That was my first one. And so then I just kept studying more about it. And then finally, my mom said to me, now I'm 26. Okay, so this was 1920 when all of this kind of started just developing in my mind. And then at the age of 26, my mom was watching me study and she says, you know, at some point you're just going to have to do it. She's like, you keep
Nice.
studying because I was very much a perfectionist. And I was like, well, I have to know everything so that this goes right. And my mom's like, you know, you really just need to just like do it. She's like, you're not
Yeah.
really going to learn any more at this stage until you actually buy one and do it. So I did all my homework. I found a place in Lafayette, Indiana. You know, Purdue University was there. Big
Oh,
hospital was
nice.
there. It's a flourishing town, and I picked a neighborhood that was close to a good school, close to a big hospital. Like everything was, textbook perfect for this purchase, and it was a duplex. And then the market crashed.
Oh,
And everybody said to me, this was 2008, and they said, what in the world are you doing buying a house? And I was like,
busy.
this is a no brainer because the prices are at the bottom.
Yeah.
And so I literally had every person that I talked to, except for my mother, say, this is a terrible idea. You shouldn't be buying the
Mhm.
house. The market is at the bottom. And I'm just sitting there going, like, common sense. Well, like, don't you want to buy low and sell high?
Yeah,
Like, the
that's
price is not going to go any lower. So I saved up the money and had to ask my mom to co-sign. So mom co-signed for me.
great.
And that was my first one. And that little duplex was such a cash flower and did really well. And I would go home to Lafayette. I didn't wasn't from Lafayette, but I would go to Lafayette and check on the property about twice a year. Went in probably maybe 5 or 6 years later, and all of a sudden, the school's gone to crap. The hospital is like completely shut down and
Oh,
closed, and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay, time to get out. Time
yeah,
to sell. I didn't make a lot of money off of it when I sold it, but I cash flowed along the way, and I learned a ton. And
yeah.
so
You learn the
again,
degree of that.
yeah, you talk about how you just have to like there's never going to be the perfect time. There's never going to be the perfect time for anything. And at some point you just have to dive in and you just have to do it. I mean, do as
Yeah,
much
you have
homework
to
as you
just,
can.
yeah, you're always learning anyway, and that's part of the process. Like you, for instance, with that duplex, had you not done that and you're waiting to do it now, the learning curve is going to be a lot steeper. Like now, you can also know that things are going to go. There are going to be issues. There's going to be problems. Things like your mom said, just go for it, and then you're going to have to figure it out because you're going to have problems. There's issues. You're going to have tenant issues, property issues, things like that on the yacht as well. But I tell people all the time the yacht issues and boat issues, you can figure those out. Those are logical, but like the people problems, those take a little bit longer because a lot of times other things going on that we need to really investigate or even dig deeper, or maybe that person needs to go or something like that, but it just really goes back to your mindset. You really just have to make up your mind that you're doing it, and just kind of go for it and figure it out. Don't do it without doing any research, but just keep learning as you're doing it, because once you do it, you're going to be around all these other people that are doing it. They're going to be doing things that you might not have even imagined. Then get exposed to that. And then, when I thought I'd have 5, 10, rental properties, and, in 10 years, and it's kind of a completely different direction where I'm mostly focusing on apartments. And, that's,
So are
I
you
didn't,
part of are you, because I think you and I, when we spoke on the phone the other day, realized that we invest differently. You're at a much higher but a different level than me. Um, my knowledge base and my comfort level is either buying duplexes or buying single families.
yeah.
And that's just kind of my forte and what I like. But I also kind of got off the phone with you thinking, you know what? Maybe it's time to learn another avenue.
Hmm.
But again, there's that balance of knowing, finding what you're good at
Hmm.
and being okay with staying in that lane, but then also going, wait a minute, I need to kind of get outside my little comfort zone here and see if there's another way. So what and I just want to explain something because I know this young lady is going to listen to this that was telling me I've got all of this tip money. What do I do with it? And I was like, I do real estate. I do a little bit of stocks. I diversify that whole thing you hear about diversify, diversify. You need to
Hmm.
do it. As much as I would like to put everything in one little basket so I could keep an eye on it, that's a bad idea. But um, so I forgot where I was going. I was going down a rabbit hole, Scott. So,
Well, you were talking
but
about
you, you,
the young lady had some tip on it
yeah.
on
So,
what to
so
do.
Yeah, so you got to look and you got to see what you're comfortable with. Like I said, I was comfortable with duplexes. I was comfortable with single families. I've bought some. I've made some really good money off of some. I've lost money off of some, but I think that having a few of them, in your repertoire helps for when one of them's not doing so well, the other one's
Yeah,
probably doing really,
most
really
def
well.
yeah,
And
most
so and I learned with my style, what I like to do is I either like to have properties that are cash flow, monthly cash flow properties. And so for her listening, that's where I was going. What that means is most oftentimes you don't get both. You don't get the ones
mm,
that cash
that's
flow really well
pre-rent
month to month. And then when you
and
sell them,
appreciated. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
you
pretty
don't get the
tough.
huge appreciation.
Yeah,
And those unicorns are out there, but typically
they are
not.
good.
And
Yeah,
I did a couple of different ways. I did the ones that would monthly cash flow really well, but when I sold them, not well. But then
yeah,
I
not
did
much.
huge risk with one area in just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina.
So it's good place, good market.
Yeah, and bought this little duplex. It was in a historic area, and with those areas, they can either go really well or go really bad.
Yeah, you have to
And
be careful with the historic stuff, because as you go to do any type of repairs and maintenance, sometimes you might need all kinds of permits and approval from the city, and can be a
yep.
lengthy process.
Well, and I learned that along the way, but I studied up on that. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, look, you just have to do this. You've done all the homework. I learned more as I went along. That property was a struggle every month, but I kept it for years and years and years. And the return on that was insane. And the best one that I've done yet. And so that risk of jumping into a historic area was a good risk. But
Mhm.
they don't always work out. I'm sure you've had,
No,
again, going back to failures, like failures, mistakes, whatever you want to call them. I love them because it's a way to learn, and that's the only way you're going to learn.
yeah.
Yeah, we try to minimize them, especially when it comes to financial mistakes. But so explain your type of investing to me because you're more bigger apartments. Are you part of a group? Are you part of a fund? How does that work?
Well, I'll explain. What I do is mostly what I do for my own personal stuff is I have my own personal portfolio where we have a 13 unit where it's a joint venture with just a couple of other people, and it's similar like if you and I bought a house together, same kind of thing, but we'd have to both be active in it. Like one of us manages the property, or call the contractors or what have you, or we manage the asset together. Because it's the SEC has some compliance issues with stuff like that, but it would just be basically like you and I partner. And then I have some deals where I'm a general partner, where you're active in the deal, because usually it's with these apartments or commercial real estate. You have general partners and limited partners. Think of general partners as the people that are active that are managing the deal, or like with the yacht, we're the ones operating the the yacht, and then limited partners are the ones putting the money in, like the boss or the owners, and they get the lion's share of everything. And I have both general partners, and I also invest as a limited partner, which I highly suggest people investigating these limited partnerships and while you're working on the yachts, because the rates are good, and it's all backed by real estate, and you just invest passively. You're not managing the property. You're not going and fixing toilets in the middle of the night. You're not doing that. But with all of these deals, it really depends on the sponsor or the operator. Same thing like with the charter operation of the boat. It all comes down to the captain or the management company, the people that are operating the boat. Um, it's very similar. But I have some general partnerships, some limited partnerships, and the key for me as I get closer to retirement, and have more limited partnerships with other syndicators and operators that I know, I can trust, that I know that regardless of what happens, things are going to go wrong, that they're going to go to the mat to make things happen. And they have money invested in the deals too, so that if I lose, they stand to lose too. So they're going to fight even harder to keep that afloat. And that's how I do it. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. It's whatever you're comfortable with. But I strongly recommend anybody that's a professional or in on the yachts or business owner to put some money into these passive investments like this, to where, like for instance, the young lady, she could get into some of these syndications or something where she generates cash flow, like you're saying, a return on the
How does
asset.
the syndication work? Explain that.
Okay, the syndication basically works like myself and the group. We go out and find the property, we underwrite the property, we acquire the property, get all the debt. We get, say, for instance, it's a $10 million property, and then the loan would be maybe 70 to 80% of that, plus some repairs. So then 7 or 8 million would be the loan, and then you'd need money to close and all the other operating costs, plus some reserves in case things go wrong. So say, for instance, you'd have another three and a half, 4 million that you'd have to raise. But you'd go to investors and they'd put money in, and then that we would all group together and then buy the property. Now then, as a general partner, we'd have professional property management. If not, we would have in-house property management. We would
Mhm.
operate the property on term for, generally it's about 5 to 7 years, sometimes longer. Then there's usually a capital event like a refinance to continue to keep the property, and then the investors would stay in, because we always like the investors to stay in, because that way all their money is out plus a return, and then they're still getting a return having no money really in the deal. Along with us, after you refinance, it's really kind of a no-brainer at that point. And then they would continue on with that. And if it's sold, then return all the capital to the investors and to the operators, and then go on and go to another one. But commercial real estate is structured a little bit differently, because you don't have 30-year loans. They're usually 3, 5, 10, 12, sometimes 15-year notes, and then there's usually it's amortized over 30 years, which means that you're paying the payment based on it being the debt being 30 years. So after the 10-year period, then there's a balloon payment, which you have to pay for all of it at that 10-year mark. Or they do that so you have to refinance, so the banks keep making money, stuff like
Let's
that. So
let's go back to simple, because
okay,
you're talking $7, $8 million. And
okay,
imagine your 21-year-old self. you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
go, oh my God, like I can't even touch that. How old were you when you bought your first house?
Well, first house, I was 30, I'm 30 and
How old are
4.
you now?
I'm 55.
Okay. So we're talking 20 years.
Yeah.
And your first house cost how much?
138,000.
So you bought a $138,000 house, and 20 years later, you're talking about $7 and $8 million. Couple things I
Yields.
want to point out. It's possible. It's more than
Yeah, it
possible,
is
but
more
it
than possible.
takes time. And I
Yes, it
remember
does.
back at my 20-year-old self, I had a young mom and she was 40 when she bought the farm that we have now, which is just big, amazing, beautiful farm. And I remember my cocky little 20-something-year-old self thinking, well, I'm going to I'm going to do what she's done but much quicker than 40.
Yes.
No, sorry, because I'm 43 now, and I'm doing well. But let me tell you, and so that's a for the young people listening, or any age really, go easy on yourself. Go easy
Yes.
on yourself because everything costs more and takes more time. It
Well,
just takes a lot more time.
everyone in their own time, there's that saying by Theodore Roosevelt, comparison is the thief of joy. Don't stop comparing yourself to everyone else in their timeline. Do it in your own.
And you're in
Just
$7 and $8 million deals. And I started off, so I come from the Midwest, a different area. Prices are a lot lower. But when
comes a little
I
lower
bought
than,
when I bought my first property, I bought that little duplex for $54,000.
excellent.
And then I bought another one for like 60,000, another one for 60,000 there in the Midwest. But then what you can potentially sell those suckers for if you hang on to them for a few years,
Yeah.
or going back to cash flowing monthly, is really good. Because I remember back when I had a mortgage of $300, but I was renting the sucker for $600 a
Yeah.
month.
Yeah.
Or I bought one for 60,000, held on to it, and sold it for 180,000.
Well,
My
I mean,
dollar numbers aren't as big as yours.
yeah.
It's inspiring, but I'm also okay with the little
Yeah.
things that I buy. I just bought a single family property in Northwood, the cute little area
Really. Oh,
of West Palm.
it's a great area there.
Yeah, I looked high and low. I wheeled and dealed, bought a place that was listed for 299, picked it up for 220. Imagine what that's going to do in 5 years in West Palm Beach.
And imagine 10 years, 20 years, you're not going to care what you paid for it. Kind of,
No.
yeah. But
But you have to save. You have to save for the down payment, which is typically 20%. You have to have 6 months of reserves so that the bank's
yeah,
going. And what that means is the bank's going, okay, if something happens and there's a stretch that the property's vacant, she can still pay the mortgage, you know. So my point is it doesn't matter where you start, just start, because
yeah,
you can start small and stay simple like I do, because it's what I prefer to do with the way my career is right now, and then maybe put a little bit in, stocks and
some
that
other
kind of
things.
thing. But you went from 130,000 to now talking about, 7 and $8 million deals with business partners, and and let's be clear here, you're using the day job as
Mm-hmm.
a means to an end. Yes, we love being
Yes.
captains. We love yachting.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we love our jobs, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm saving that money and putting it into another vehicle so that when I do want to retire, and let's say I want to just dump all of these houses, I can retire. I'm not going to retire at the level of what our owners do, but I'm going to retire for what's comfortable for me. So the point is that $4,000 or $5,000 tip, don't go blow it over at
Yeah.
Atlantis at
Yeah.
the
There's
casino.
options. There's options and opportunities. That would compare just to make it probably a little more clear because I probably went into a few more details that might have made it sound a little more complicated than it is. I mean, compare the syndication to like a stock. Like you're like buying shares in that. And it's not just me by myself, it's a team of us. There's probably 6 of us on each team. And then the investors, that could be a multitude, then it could be 100 investors as well. So it's a group, it's a team effort. So say for instance, you're buying one share of say Microsoft for $100. It's the same thing. you're buying in this property at, 50,000 or what have you. And there's like maybe 100 of you to do, however much that we need to get that thing. But it's the same thing, like how you're saying you have to have reserves and everything else. And you have
But
to,
you can start
have a
small. Your
plan. Yeah,
buy-in, your
you can
buy-in
start.
to a
Oh,
yeah,
can you?
you could have a small buy-in. And so the thing is to explore these areas, to not squander
Yeah,
the money, um start small in case you do mess up. You don't have as
yeah,
far to fall, but again, look at where you are in 20 years. Like
yeah,
that's huge. And it doesn't matter at what age. If you're 55 and listening,
yeah,
just start, just do it
yeah.
because
That's all things are not for all people. What works for you, might not work for me, but I do, recommend that you find because there's so many different ways to do it. Find what you like doing and what works for you. And if it works, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. I mean, it's because there's so many people do short-term rentals. There's some friends of mine in Dallas, a couple they have kids, and they have like 200 single family homes. And I said, you can do this. It's easy for us because we've done it so many times. And they're rentals and they have partners and stuff like that. You don't know what you don't know until you expose yourself to all these new ideas. I didn't know that this was possible. And the first guy that I worked for was a real estate guy. He was a builder. They built 600 homes a year. He gave me my first captain's job, and he kind of gave me advice when I was buying my first home and stuff like that. And you know, there's just so many different ways to do it, and he would have helped me a lot. But he's since passed and everything. But you know, I thought it was just himself and his other wealthy friends buying into these properties, but it really wasn't. It was him, and would raise the capital through his network of people. Granted, you had to be invited in, but since the 2012 Jobs Act, it's now you can advertise these deals and people know about it, which is a great thing because it was an untold secret of all the wealthy people where the returns are great and it's backed by real estate. Everybody understands that people have to live somewhere, people have to work somewhere, all those things. That's what I do.
and you know what too is we are surrounded by the world's wealthiest and most intelligent and successful people. And I ask questions when I
Yeah.
have an owner or a guest that I know is receptive, as scary as it may be. You got to remember the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And
Mm-hmm.
my mom taught me that. And she says, if you have a question, ask it. Just ask it in a respectful manner. Because if you don't ask it, how are you ever going to know? And I've had owners that I have sat down that I know want to see me win, that are kind and want to share what they know. So for those of you that are younger or you're not the captain, don't be afraid to ask to have a sit down with your owner and say, hey, this is something I'm interested in. Would you mind sharing a little bit with me? Because you never know where that conversation is going to go. And I find that there are a lot of people out there that owners that want to see you win, that want to see you do
Mm-hmm.
well, and they want to share what they know. And I've had a few good conversations where I've sat down and said, hey, I think I want to do this. What do you think about that? For example, I just called the CFO of the family office the other day and I said, hey, I'm thinking this and this and this. What do you think is best? And he took 30 minutes on the phone with me and told me what he thought is best. And I was afraid to ask. I was, but sometimes you just have to work up the courage, the gumption, because
Yeah.
if you don't, sometimes these, going back to you, what I said at the very beginning, when I first learned of Scott Kidd and saw he was running this great big boat and he's this big captain, why would he ever talk to me? I'm just this little captain that doesn't know anything. He's not going to want to waste his time on me. And look, here
Well,
we are. So don't be
anybody
afraid to ask
anybody that
questions and speak out. Yeah.
anybody that knows me that knows that I'll pretty much talk to anybody. I mean, I guess I grew up when where I grew up, it was, speak only when spoken to. It's probably similar to you on the farm where, we, if adults are talking, you don't talk. And so for a long time when I went places, I was very quiet because, you speak when spoken to, and I'm going to have something to say. And now I'm kind of making up for it. So
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't. Sorry. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You got to ask
yeah, that
questions. It's the only way you're
it
going to learn.
really does. But all these, getting back to your point of all these bosses and stuff, I mean, most of them will gladly tell you all their successes and failures. They love telling you stories. Most people that are successful, what I've found is, yeah, whether it's real estate or any other type of business, they will tell you their story because they they live through it and they will gladly share with you. And they like to see people that are one, take the initiative and that have, you know, like myself, I like to see especially younger people because as a young person, I know we got a bad rep. Oh, they're lazy, they're not doing anything, they don't want to do anything. It's the same thing people are saying about young people now.
Every
It's like, well,
generation, my
yeah,
granddad
it's
said,
that guy,
kids
oh,
these days.
it's the end. It's the end of the world and everything, but I think that we're living in such an incredible time that you can actually be so much more efficient and get so much more done.
I
You
think
just
so.
take advantage of these things. And I get excited when I see, as one of my partners, he's in his 20s. And I was like, if I knew all that stuff, I didn't know any of that stuff existed, and of course, everybody in their own time, but, I wasn't ready in my 20s to really do other than what I was doing. Because that's why it came to me at a later stage in life because I was ready. And that's, you're presented with what you can handle. It's sometimes what
Yes.
might be a challenge or, there's that saying, the obstacle is the way.
Yep.
Sometimes you got to push through that to get to the other side
Don't pick
because,
the easy route.
yeah, because the easy way, you're going to be complacent. You're going to be, you're presented with that challenge for a reason. And it will be, it's not necessarily a failure. It just means that you're one step closer to that success. That's
Yep.
all it
You
is.
fail forward.
Yeah, you have to really take those challenges on. Time is our most valuable asset. People say money and all those things, but to
It's
use your
time.
time valuable, you're valuable as it is. Use it wisely. You're going to have a great life for yourself and for all the people around you because you don't get it back. That any one of these guys that has all this money, they would gladly pay all their fortunes to go back 50 years if they're in their 80s,
Yep.
and to do it again because they know if all the money went away, they could do it again.
Yep. Well, the one that I can't believe we've been just chatting so long. The one last thing that I want to share with everyone is you have you are the Yachty real estate investor, and you have groups, you have meetups. Anybody of any level or whatever
Yeah,
is
anyone can come.
free to
It's
come.
it's
So tell us quickly about those, typically when and where they are and how they work.
well, actually, it was one tonight at the Yacht Bar and Kitchen in Fort Lauderdale, and I'll be there tonight. It's works from 6 to 9, and we also do West Palm Beach. That's usually earlier in the month. They're usually on Thursdays, and then one Stewart, it's Jensen Beach at a friend of mine's pizza shop on Mondays, the first Monday of the month. And I started it just because I didn't know about these things, so I wanted other people to know and actually have these benefits. I figured it would add value to other people because like you're the young lady there, she doesn't know what to do with the money. I would hate for her to be in this work for 10 years and walk away with nothing. That would
I
bug
know.
me. It would destroy me because like there's so much opportunities where in 10 years, if you're single or as a couple or what have you, and you buy a bunch of real estate or invest wisely, after 10 years, you could go and work part time probably
You
and
could.
just,
You absolutely
go
could.
want to get that life, while you're building that up. But and I collaborated with a group called Like Minded, and they're going nationwide. So and it's novice to expert, not just people on yachts. It's a lot of real estate professionals, business owners, anybody that wants to come. I mean, a friend of mine that's there now, he has an art fund, which I went to the art West Palm Beach or the Palm Beach Art Show the other day. And I said, art in a fund? I didn't know that. Well, I said, that's something new. I said, but he showed me the art that's in there. And I said, wow, it's really cool. And then I met somebody else a few days later that leases art out to these museums and stuff. So I put the two of them together. And I was like, well, that's pretty interesting that you can actually buy art, lease it to a museum, have it in a fund, and other people that are, yeah, because it used to be just wealthy people could really invest in art, and now here's an opportunity where
There's a
none
fund.
of
You
us
can
will.
come with
Yeah,
a
yeah,
smaller portion. What you
and
can, yeah.
we can put in 20, 50,000 into this fund, and you can reap the benefits of owning art. And
And if you don't
it,
have 20,000, find a
yeah,
fund. They usually have
yeah,
minimum buy-ins, but find a
yeah,
fund that'll let you put 10,000 in it. And I
yeah,
know after two charters, you've got 10 grand that you can put
yeah.
into a fund.
There's
But
crowdfunding. I mean, a friend of mine has a crowdfunding portal that
but do
you
your
can do
research.
crowdfunding. Yeah,
Yeah. You know, Scott,
diligence is,
it
is paramount.
you're leaving your stamp on the world, and you started this just, talking about how you want to help people. We both want to help people. We're both
Mhm.
very passionate about helping people and helping them move forward and live their best life, as cliche as it sounds. And you're doing a fantastic job. And my
Well,
engineer said
thanks.
the other day, he said, "You want to just put your stamp on the world, don't you?" And I said, "I do, and I'm not leaving here until I make a difference."
Yes, you
And
too.
you're the same. And so I just want to point out that don't be afraid to talk to Scott like I was,
No,
15 years
come talk to
ago,
me
and go
anyone.
to one of your meetups. And I don't care if
Yeah.
you're 20, 30, 40, 50, go to one of these meetups. And if you're the youngest person in the room, that's fantastic because look at all of the brain power you're going to have around you.
Mhm.
So, but again, at whatever age, go to one of Scott's meetups, go ask the questions, be around the people, absorb the knowledge. And even if it's not real estate that you're interested in, you're going to meet somebody and it could be art, it could be something else.
Yeah,
But,
there's a little
but yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah, and
So,
feel free to reach
Scott,
out to me as well. I mean, that's fine on social media and my
yeah.
or anything.
So we can find, so those of you that might want to get in touch with Scott, obviously you know where to find me. I can put you in touch with Scott, or you can find him Scott Kidd. I think he's probably the only Scott
Yeah,
KIDD
or
on
either.
LinkedIn. So he's pretty easy to find.
Yeah, and you can find me on investwithscottkid.com. It has all my podcasts, social media, real estate stuff, other stuff. But, I'm glad to help. I actually, which was pretty good last night, I got an email from a guy that's a young man that's going to the University of Arizona. And he reached out to me via email, and I'm going to talk to him tomorrow. So please feel free to reach out. I'm, glad to help. It's that's what it makes me really happy to see people that are actually doing things and
And
trying to
winning,
make a difference. Yeah,
making a
and
difference.
you will win eventually. You're not gonna win every time, but maybe you will. Maybe you're that guy.
Yeah, maybe so. And you're doing an awesome job of putting your stamp in the world and making a difference. And I think if we all just work to try to just make a difference, at least in the life of one person,
Yeah,
um,
just
you know,
do one do one good thing for one person every day. If everybody
yeah,
did that, it would make a huge difference. I
it
mean, it's
would.
all it is. I mean, that's one thing that I try to focus on every day. Like even if it's just somebody helping somebody with some packages, putting them in their car,
Or
open the
even if it's
door,
just smiling a big
anything.
smile at them,
Yeah.
you know?
Or just, telling somebody a joke when they're having a bad day or something,
Yeah.
just saying hello. Sometimes people where I live, I'm fortunate that people actually saying hello to each other, which took me a little bit getting used to again because that's the way I grew up. And now I'm living in South Florida and New York, a lot of these big cities, like people don't, you say hello to them, they ask what was this guy want?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, so with that, everybody, Scott Kidd's approachable, and now the big scary captain is now a friend of mine, and that is so awesome. So, Scott, thanks so much for having us on here. And like you said, everybody, we can share where we'll collab with Scott, so you can find him that way. You can find him through his website, and easy guy to find. So, Scott, thanks so much for coming on here. I really have enjoyed this, and a different take on my podcast, but it's a question that I get a lot about is money and what can you do. So thanks so much for coming.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate our conversation, and that we're just getting started. This is to be continued many times again. So,
To be continued with
a
Scott
little
Kidd.
appreciation. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks everybody.